So, welcome everybody. This is our garden in West Tyrone, and this part of the garden was started in the winter of 2012 when we planted a hedge on our north side, and the rest of the area here was just grass. So behind me you can see there's a big planting of trees now, and those are native trees that we've grown, and they provide shelter and habitat for the other creatures that live here with us, and we wanted to encourage all the wildlife that we really could do to come to the site. So that helps us with biodiversity. It helps us to maintain things without using chemicals. So we're happy with that, and so I'll explain a little bit. At that time we were interested in permaculture, and we've used some permaculture principles in putting the site together. So what we did was we examined how, first of all, obviously permaculture is about permanent cultures. So the idea was to plant what they call a food forest. So a forest is the natural end of the growing system in nature, and around us here we have designed it so that we've planted food trees and food bushes that mimic the system that nature naturally would develop. And around us we can see, if I walk through into here, into the orchard, you'll see some of those trees around us here. These are all apple trees on this side. So what we've done is, because on our north side we had quite a lot of ancient forestry area, we didn't want to cut that down. On the south side we didn't want to cut that down because it's all habitat for creatures. So we left the south side growth, and that meant that some of the trees cut out the light a little. So we've left the rest of the site open so that the apple trees can gain light from that, because obviously we do suffer from low light here in Northern Ireland, and it's always good. The more light you can have, the better for things to grow in such a short season as we have. So this year we have quite a few apples coming on the trees. We don't really have to worry about buying apples now. We tend to find that there are plenty, and you can see the little apple coming there. And there's a lot more on some of the other apple trees too. So we're very happy to have those here, and of course if we don't eat them, our birds can eat them, and that's always a good thing. So on this side, towards the north side a little, we have pear trees, and you can just see the pears coming here. There's quite a few of them this year. And here we have gooseberries. So we planted some gooseberries and currants in the background there. And what we have done is we have planted what they call a fedge. So it's like a fence that's a hedge. We've used willow to do that because it's fast growing, and it uses up a lot of the water. It takes the water to ground, if you like. So what we did was we realised that the contours ran across the site from south to north. So along the contours we planted willow fedges to slow up the water that runs down the site from the west to the east, and that means the water stays on site and we get the benefit of it, so that we don't have to water the trees, etc. And that normally isn't a problem, but this year there's been quite a drought in the springtime, so I think it's been of benefit for us to keep that water here. And you can see that on the other side here as well, there's plum trees and some more apple trees. There's a big variety of apple trees, and they all came from Irish seed savers, and they are native trees, if you like. They were grown here, and there's one particular one that we're very fond of, which is called Green Chisel, and it's a Donegal Tyrone tree, and it produces the most lovely apples, eating apples every year. It's really, really nice. So definitely would recommend that one. to plant if you're in the Donegal Tyrone area, because it certainly likes growing here. So we're just a bit further up west of the orchard now, and this is another area that we've sort of divided off using the hedge, and we can see here there's a planting of roses, and that's flowering currants. This here is a cob nut, so it's providing cob nuts or hazelnuts for us, and there's 2 of them there actually, and then underneath there's more currants. This is an apple tree we grafted and planted a couple of years ago, so hopefully it'll produce something for us in the next few years. Around us you can see the annual beds of potatoes and cabbages and parsnips and turnips. And over on this side, the perennials, again, lots of currants. Red currants, black currants, white currants. And we find that we have enough now we can share with the birds, so we don't have any problem. We don't have to fight over them. On up here, you can see there's a few unusual kind of things. That's a medlar tree there. It provides big hips, which you can use to make jams, etc. Then there's a little bamboo in the background there, which is having a bit of a bad time. It didn't like the drought at all. So hopefully we'll get some bamboo shoots one day. And these are Szechuan Peppers. So Szechuan pepper trees, and they provide peppers for us, which are a kind of replacement for black peppercorns. So there'll be a harvest later on this year. I thought I was going to lose it all, but because the frost burned off all the earlier flowers, but it's producing more flowers now, so that's good. There's another apple tree here. And then in the background, a beautiful elderberries in the hedge. Elderflower going crazy up there. That's flowers and fruit for everybody. And here we have another nut tree, another cob nut. This side again, there's more fruit bushes. So on up through here, we've got rhubarb, another perennial, and then behind it is a big bank of raspberries, which the insects are really enjoying at the moment, pollinating away, and then the birds will come and help us pick them. But there's always tons and tons of them. And this is a onion bed, which is, I always plant onions here, but those are this year's sets coming along now. On this side, I planted a sort of wildlife area with lots of what people would call weeds, but they do wonders for nature, for wildlife. There's sweet cicely, there's teasels, evening primrose, campion. There's a knapweed there that planted itself, and some foxgloves. And in the middle there's a lilac bush which has some lovely flowers on it earlier. And on round at the back there's also a perennial cornflower. So again, just really to support the biodiversity here. And on up here, if you want to just look at these are more currants now. These are red currants. You can see them reddening, and they'll be ready to pick shortly. And over here we have this is our willow arch, and over it we have this is a hop plant, which will flower later on. So there's plenty of diversity in perennial plants, and of course their deep roots mean that they bring up the nutrients from way down, because they're always there working their way down into the soil and absorbing nutrients and bringing them up for us. So that's a good side of perennials. So this is the path that goes up into the old garden here, and on this side you can see blackberries, which are really important for wildlife, because in the winter, if they haven't eaten the fruits, they'll eat the seeds. Bullfinches, chaffinches, they love the seeds, so we leave them now. And also you can see hawthorn berries just coming here. You can see there, and they're a great sustenance for all the birds. And of course there's ivy berries as well on the trees. And on this side we have a sloe hedge, or a blackthorn hedge that we planted, which hopefully will produce some fruits as well. And beyond it there is a paddock really that's just been allowed to go to grass, and you can see all the seed heads coming up there, and that'll provide lots of habitat too, because frogs and all sorts of other things can live in those areas, and that really sustains the whole system and makes a biosphere a little area that is almost self-contained really, in support of itself. And that's what we are trying to provide here. So here we are in the old garden, and this is right at the top of the site. So this is a mixed area. If you're wondering why we have so many wire fences, it's because we have rabbits, and we can't really make much grow when the rabbits eat it. But in here you'll see this is fennel, so that's a nice perennial herb you can use for the leaves and the seeds as well. There's sage, which provides so many flowers for bees. It's this one's just going over now, but the flowers, the bees just love them. And then we have rosemary next to it, and there's quite a lot of rosemary there. And then further over there is a cabbage, which is a perennial cabbage I grow. It's called walking stick cabbage, and I have quite a lot of it there because I like to share it. Pigeons are very keen on cabbage, so they like to come and eat some of it. And it's spread right through the garden here in various sites. And over on the other side there's a couple of apple trees we planted when we first started planting perennials, and they've been there a little longer than the others. They're both cooking apple types, and again mostly Northern Ireland types, or north of Ireland types of apples. That far one's called Martin Seedling, and this one is Sovereign. So we find them all very successful really. Those two usually come very early, and you can see through the other beds there's various types of annuals planted, but there's also blueberries growing there, and another currant bush. Some of the annuals would be onions, and they're for seed really, so I'm going to leave them there. And then there's pumpkins and various other things. So if you'll come on round and have a look at the greenhouse, I'll show you a couple of other things. So just briefly at the end here we can see some of the things that you can actually grow under cover as well. That's a grape on that side, and on this side I have a fig, which has produced some really nice figs we had last year, and you can see one there. They're not quite ripe yet. They go sort of brown colour, and then you know they're ripe, and they are extremely nice. So I'd recommend anyone having a go at planting some perennials. They certainly are more sustainable in the way of providing biodiversity and permanent cultures, which allow us not to have to dig or plough or do any of those things, and we don't disturb the soil. And in that way we are protecting nature and helping ourselves as well, of course, by providing our food. So that's a good way of looking after ourselves.